Welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and with me today is Betsy Morgan, the director of the Middlesex Coalition for Children. And we're going to dedicate this half-hour program to talking about all the things that we can do to make sure that we have the kind of society we hope to have someday, and that's by investing in children. So, where shall we start? With reading?
Absolutely, we could start with reading. In Middletown, about 30% of our children are at third grade are not reading at grade level or even close to grade level. There are 5 tiers of scores in the third grade CMT scores. The 2 lowest, basic and below basic, have about 30% of our kids in them. And that really means that they are not reading. And what is worse, they're not likely to learn to read in any serious way if at third grade they haven't begun to read. The trouble is that the education train moves on. And reading is a basic skill that is used in every subsequent grade, and kids who don't have it fall further and further behind. So that 30% are unlikely to catch up, and by high school they are on track to drop out.
I just want to jump in on that for a moment and say I was reading something last week about the achievement gap in Connecticut, and I was astounded to read that at the senior level in high school, students who are of color or low income are 3.5 grade levels behind their counterparts who are majority students who are of the probably upper middle income and high income, if you divide the world in that way. But what that means, if they're 3.5 years behind their counterparts, they basically missed all of high school.
They basically missed all of high school.
Right,
yes.
Right. And
Right.
That starts at the very beginning when they're not at grade level, reading at grade level in the third grade.
That's right. In fact, famously, people who plan for future prison populations look at the third grade reading scores to project how many, what the need for prisons will be, because already at third grade you can tell who is going to make it and who isn't. Our education system just does not have the capacity to do the remedial work after third grade that might bring those children up to speed. What that means is that for those 30% of our kids, a third of our kids, to have any real shot at having a career, build a family, a home, a life in the community, we need to start earlier.
And I will talk a little bit as this half hour progresses, but there must be some key reasons why there's a deficit of that scope. I mean, is it the families don't read at home? They don't enjoy spending time reading words off the page with their children? Or what are the reasons?
Mm-hmm. Well, low level of literacy are transmitted from generation to generation. So a large part of the problem is that the parents' generation is not highly literate. And consequently, they don't talk to their children the way more literate parents do. Oral language is deficient. They don't read to their children. They don't have a relationship with books that better educated parents do. They don't do all of the things that middle class parents take for granted. I was in the supermarket the other day, and behind a woman with a baby in her cart who looked to be maybe 9 months old, and she was narrating the whole supermarket experience to the baby, who was not taking in very much of it. Nevertheless, he had this wonderful stream of oral language coming at him, talking about the milk over here and the different kinds of vegetables and how they would have to maneuver around a cart ahead of them, and it just made me feel that that baby was not yet a year, was already off to a good start. In fact, this week I saw the statistics on a language acquisition by age 3, and upper income children who have grown up in upper income families have acquired 800 words by age 3. They recognize and in many cases use 800 words. Children who are in middle income families have 600 words. Children in lower income families have 400 words. So at age 3, there is a deficit in a language deficit that is already there in place. That's oral language, really, not, of course, not even pre-reading skills, but
Right.
there is an oral language deficit.
Right. And boy, the linguists would have a lot to say about that.
Right.
But we have to take a break,
Yep.
and we'll be right back, and then we're going to go right back into reading. Well, welcome back. This is Anna Wasesha, the president of Middlesex Community College, and today I'm talking with Betsy Morgan about the Middlesex Coalition for Children's work, but we're focusing on reading. And right before the break, we were talking about the numbers of words that a child from a low-resourced family might have, which is about, at the age of 3, and it's about 400 words in their vocabulary compared to a child who's in a family who has means, and they may have up to 800 words. And I was thinking about how language really does formulate the way that you see the world. And the classic examples, Eskimos have, 15 terms for the word snow because it's so much a part of their day-to-day experience. And so if you begin to think about having so few words to describe your universe, you have realized people are thinking much simpler, blunter ways about their human experience. Yeah.
That's really true. But what worries me is the deficit that the children who don't grow up in a language-rich environment have to overcome, and the difficulty of overcoming that. So our current thinking is that we need to be intervening right from birth, or even before birth.
Right.
That there are two predictors of school failure. One is maternal education. The other is economic resources.
Mm-hmm.
Those are basically the two. If you know those things about the home from which a child comes, you can pretty well predict school success or school failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so the focus on language is really a focus on maternal or parental level of education, and whether there are ways of strengthening that or of helping parents overcome deficits that they may have by giving them access to techniques and ways of interacting with their children that can make up the deficit.
And of course, we know that can happen. I mean, we've only had a century, in less than a century, where parents actually had a much formal education beyond elementary school.
Right.
And yet we've produced, the world's greatest scientists, and we've put a man on the moon and done all those kinds of things. So we know that we can turn that around.
We can
somehow.
turn that around. Public education has been a great success story. As you know, when it began in the early 19th century, people didn't believe that most of the population could be educated.
Right.
And we have proof that it can be educated, but we haven't gotten all the way there yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, we may have lost a little ground.
We may have lost a little ground.
That's
yes.
what concerns me. In fact, I was reading the Hartford Courant, and they have a Facebook page of some kind, and there's a whole series of people writing in about whether or not people should be encouraged to go to college. And I would say the majority of the writers did not see the value in college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of stunning. I was thinking about writing a response.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, you were telling me that you're an historian and that your area is the United Kingdom. And I think I told this story when I visited your group that day, that I had this fantastic professor of higher education, and she had never married, and she lived and breathed higher education. But after World War II, she went to Great Britain and participated in a binational research study on what elements went into deciding or influencing a person being able to go to college. And she said the decision was made in the first grade. And that's essentially it's exactly what you're saying. It reinforces the importance of reading. and of the role of the parents. So both of those things, maybe more so. I wonder if it's more influential than the level of income, because that level of income question goes back to what happened in the 1920s and 30s when so many people had so few resources, so little formal education, but actually produced that generation, the greatest generation of the World War II kind of generation that then, created all the things that we enjoy today, our marks of being an advanced society. Once again, the importance of parents.
Right.
Can you tell me some of the things that your coalition works on that might begin to kind of amend the circumstances we find ourselves in with these low literacy levels?
I'd be happy to. We are just about to launch an early literacy / family literacy initiative. We've wanted to do this for years, but resources weren't there, and it is tricky to collaborate across the divide between the K-12 education system and the early education system. Those are two very separate educational systems with very different philosophies. Early education has a child development perspective, whereas the K-12 system has a skills development perspective. There is just a very deep fundamental difference between those two systems, and building bridges across those two systems here in Middletown, here in Middlesex County, has been one of the things that we have been trying to do to enable us to move forward on an early literacy initiative. So we actually have been working over the past year in developing an alignment between pre-K curriculum and K1 curriculum, which had basically no relation to each other.
Wow.
And that has been going very well.
Good.
So that we now feel in a position to launch forth into an effort where both the K-12 system and the early care and education system will be on the same page and moving forward together. And the emphasis is going to be on oral language in the very earliest years, because oral language is really where it starts. That gap between the number of words that some children know and the number of words that other children know. We really don't start with a printed page. We start with what comes in through our ears.
Of course.
And children who are talked to, talked with, have parents or caregivers who tell stories, who are hearing a lot of words not from the TV set, but from adults who are interacting with them and who are encouraging their response and their growth of their own language, so that it becomes an interactive process between the adult and the child. Those are the children that are really acquiring language and moving forward.
It touches for me on one of my major concerns, which is the number of hours that children spend in front of a television set.
Right.
And I don't have the data point right at the top of my head, but whatever it is, it's way too much, and sometimes kind of shocking.
Right.
Yeah, it's extreme.
It is extreme.
Yeah, and I think that interactive thing is so incredibly important. You're right.
Right. And people think that kids are learning from the TV, but the evidence shows that that's not the case. That they are not acquiring language and language skills from a passive connection with language.
Right.
They need it to be active, and they need it to be embedded in a relationship.
Right. And I think they're also not disciplining or learning them how to extend their attention. Because television, what dominates on it is short bursts of information. It's kind of a chaotic organization of thinking in that way.
But it's mostly using language. The children need to be using language in order to really acquire it, and that's where the parent who's paying attention or the teacher comes in, is to get the child to actually use the language. Then it becomes part of the growth of the brain.
Right, exactly.
Actual formation of the brain.
Which is what we want to do.
Which is what we want to do, right?
Yeah. So when we come back, let's talk more about this literacy initiative, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Middlesex Moments, and today we're talking with Betsy Morgan, and we're talking about literacy and efforts that we can undertake to try to do something about the circumstances we find ourselves in, which is that 30% of the third graders in our community are not reading at grade level, not greed level. So how will this program shape up? What will it look like that you're undertaking?
Well, we're going to bring together people from all parts of the education world, including Middlesex, to design it. But we have some preliminary ideas, and those ideas focus, as I said, on oral language in the very youngest children as the principal focus. We've moved there from a kind of book distribution emphasis, which has been happening in this community for quite some while, which is great, and we need to have that happening, but it doesn't really address the root of the problem. So we need to get earlier and more intensive and more focused on parents. So the initiative is going to have essentially two dimensions. One is training all of the staff of early childhood programs in oral language development and creating a literacy-rich environment. Many of those are in child care centers, but a number of them are, for instance, home visitors. We have now built up a number of home visiting programs that send staff, trained staff, into the home with very young children to work with parents, and that has tended to be focused on either health issues or mental health issues, but we want to add a literacy dimension to that, a strong literacy dimension to that.
I'm just thinking that's one way. You also have home daycare. Are you going to be working? Have you thought about including the daycare system?
Definitely home daycare.
Okay.
That is not a large system, but it's a really important one.
So do most people take their children to early childhood centers here in Middletown?
Most people do for 3 and 4-year-olds.
Uh-huh.
The population in home daycare tends to be younger, tends to be the birth to 3-year-olds.
I didn't know that.
So they're a very important part of this initiative with its focus on early care and education. But there is a lot of informal daycare that is not even in family daycare homes.
Sure.
In fact, the majority for birth to 3 is in informal family, friends, or neighbors daycare, which is subsidized by a big state program. The Care for Kids program subsidizes informal daycare for young children. There's a lot to debate about that because that may not be necessarily the best educational environment for small children. On the other hand, it's not clear that we want to have small children in big daycare centers either. So that's an area in which we really need to think about how to move forward.
And what about parent education? How will you try to work with the parents of 3 to 4-year-olds to, actually?
That's the other part of
Okay.
it. We have been, in the last few years, we have been testing various national programs that train parents in literacy skills. And there are a couple of really good ones. The one that focuses on oral language is called Let's Talk, and works with parents with very small children, with babies and very small children, about the importance of talking, of that narrative of the trip through the supermarket, of holding a child on your lap before they can be read to, and just talking about the things that can be seen in a board book, about telling children family stories and stories about the parent's own experience, family storytelling. So Let's Talk is one of the programs that we have been experimenting with and we think is really good, and we hope now to extend to a much larger number of parents who are connected with programs in one way or another.
I love that idea.
Isn't
That's
that good?
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
And the other one is also an excellent program that has a slightly older focus on older children called Raising Readers, which is a program for parents, a multi-session program for parents on how you, starting with birth, how you make sure that your child at grade 3 is on track for school success. Both oral language and pre-literacy activities, and supporting literacy in those crucial kindergarten through third grade years.
I think this is, I'm so excited to hear about this because when I, it's been a while, so my daughter's 23, so it's been a while since I've been working with a very small child day to day in my own home. But since she was born, there's been a tremendous amount of development of these electronic toys and books so that, they can learn how to be baby geniuses. What is it called? There's a thing called Einstein. Thank you. And baby Einstein, right? So there, of course we know what that suggests, but if you have to help. I think all of us have to be helped to understand how rewarding it is to know stories. I'm going back to the oral tradition idea, because if you don't realize how rewarding it is to find out how the damsel is saved by the white knight at the end of the story, then you're less likely to be willing to read a book that will carry you. It takes a while for you to be carried through the plot to get to this wonderful ending or a tragic ending or whatever it is. And so I'm thinking back to the times when, as a child, I heard those kinds of stories. And actually, I have to say it was over cards, primarily poker, but all kinds of weird card games. Because my mother was a storyteller, but she always had a deck of cards on the table. And when we came home from school, while we were waiting for things to happen, we either were working on homework or playing cards. She had 1,000 different weird games that she would play, but the cards are really just a mechanism for keeping us all at the table, and then you would tell stories during that time.
I think we ought to incorporate that into our our initiatives, that is absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Parents need to find something that works for them, something that keeps them entertained and connected to their kids, and it may not be something that educators have thought of.
They may have, but I will just to add to why that's so great is I think it taught us all math at a very early age because because you can see the relationships between an 8 and a 7 when you're trying to build up to a gin or whatever it is, or a cribbage or something like that. So
but probably what was key in that was that it was your mother talking, and your mother interacting, and not a little computer with baby Einstein things on it.
Right.
That doesn't seem to do the trick. I mean, it's
never going to be the same.
It's never going to be the same.
This virtual world that we live in,
right.
And of course, we now are moving so much education online, and I suppose that people will develop in their own ways, and we can see that happening all around us, their own ways of actually existing in a virtual world, but we must never lose our connection to the person-to-person world that we actually physically occupy. That's what worries me a little bit. Well, so I would love to be involved in any way that I can to help with this project, including reading books to children at the point that they want to listen to the stories that you find in those great books, those fantastic things. Barnes & Noble has a project this summer where if a child reads eight books, they'll give them a book for free. Oh. I read about that in the paper this morning, and then one of my coworkers brought her son in this morning, and he's, 12, 13 years old. He's going to be reading Catcher in the Rye, which is just a wonderful book. So, it always warms my heart to think about the first time that young people get introduced to these great stories, So I'm afraid we have to draw this program to a close. But if people want to find out more about the work of the coalition, what would they do? How would they call you, email you, or do you have a website?
We don't have a website, unfortunately, but my email is emorgan, E for Elizabeth, emorgan @wesleyan.edu. And, email me and we'll put you on the list, and you will get all kinds of notices and information coming into your inbox. We would love to have you involved.
Good, wonderful. And I would also like to remind people that if they want to learn more about the community college here in our own community, Middlesex, our website address is mxcc.edu. I'm Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College. I've had such a great time talking with you today, Betsy, and I'm wishing all of our listeners a very good day.